Greetings, Earthlings and MGTOW. Millennial Gone Monk coming at you with another video. I am Millennial. So, let's get started, shall we? Today I want to talk about education, college, the differences between the two, and the relationship of the two to the complete, wholesale, and unapologetic pussification of the American man. What do I mean by this? Well, from elementary school through education, children are essentially funneled into college. You have to go to college. You have to go to college. You're going to end up working at McDonald's or being a barista if you don't go to college. Well, take a look around. Anyway, I digress. So, anyway, I think there's something sinister going on that's not being talked about. I don't know if people aren't seeing it or if they just haven't figured out a way to frame it. So that's what I'm going to do. What I want to talk about is why the government and the education industry, because education is a business, like healthcare, why they are in bed together and why they make such good bedfellows. So, why is it that all students are pushed towards college? Well, there's a number of reasons for this, but at the end of the day, as I see it, college is an ideological bastion of a certain political homogeny. In other words, it is a breeding ground for liberalism, for the doctrine, the gospel of big government, and for the gospel of a victimhood mentality. That's the purpose that college that's the purpose that college serves. That's its function, is to foster and foment that that mindset through a variety of disciplines. Obviously, I would exclude STEM for now from this observation, but it seems to me like, for the most part, the liberal arts, the humanities, the social sciences, these are tools that are being used to create the likes of Black Lives Matter, of Antifa, of the Occupy movement, a number of groups that eventually can and will serve to fulfill the political aims of the left. That's the purpose of college. Now, why would anybody do this? Why would anybody sign up for this degree of indoctrination? Well, after 12 years of brainwashing that you're going to be, working at McDonald's or living in a cardboard box if you don't go, there's a lot of pressure on kids to do this. And it's very difficult to ignore. And we still have parents who are buying into this notion that we live in a 1950s economy. Aaron Clary talks about this some. Actually, he talks about it a lot. And he unpacks this a lot in much greater depth than I do. So I would refer you to him and to his videos on this particular topic. But, so, we know that college is basically put in place to indoctrinate students to believe a certain way, to look at the world through a certain lens, a certain deconstructionist, post-structural lens. That's its purpose, is to foment the victimhood mentality among very impressionable and historically, politically active youth. So, why would the government have a vested interest in this? Well, and in this case, it's not just the political left that has an interest in it, but it is also the political right. It is the two wings of the same establishment bird, if you will, because thanks to changes in the bankruptcy code and thanks to a number of legislative items that I will cover in subsequent videos also, Your student loan debt is never forgiven outside of certain circumstances. You will pay it back, or they will extract it from you until you die. That will happen. What does this mean? It means that student loan debt creates wage slaves. There's zero risk to the lender because these loans are backed by tax dollars, right? So it's zero risk. Why not lend it out? Why I don't understand how the price of college could be skyrocketing when student loan dollars are doled out in accordance with tuition. I'm sure there's not a connection there. I digress. But what is the government's interest in this? Well, the government's interest in this is that student loan debt creates wage slaves. Student loan debt takes away the opportunity. Many times it can cripple the opportunity to start businesses, to function as an independent economic entity. And essentially, it enhances the appeal of the government as savior, as provider, and that's what's going on. So, the relationship of student loan debt to college and student loan debt to the political left goes without saying. But what about the political right? Well, the same thing is true. When you have a group of people working shit jobs because they got bullshit degrees in fields that don't pay a living wage because the market doesn't demand a living wage for many of these jobs, it's going to create a sense of helplessness. When you combine this sense of helplessness with the learned helplessness of various academic disciplines in colleges and universities, it's the perfect storm for the sanctification of the government as savior. That's something to think about. The other thing is, not only are a disproportionate number of students that are graduating with student loan debt crippling themselves economically, but they're also crippling themselves ideologically. The number of STEM graduates in accounting and, from various disciplines where there is some degree of economic viability, it is nowhere near the number of students graduating with crippling debt in basically pick your bullshit degree. So, what does this mean? Well, these bullshit degrees, whether you're talking about sociology, anthropology, African American studies, Latino studies, queer studies, media studies, communication, pick it. These are the disciplines in which the narrative of toxic masculinity as a huge force in the downfall of the patriarchal West flourish. So, what I mean is, you have a lot of people graduating with a lot of money, a lot of debt, rather, in fields that are inherently hostile towards anything remotely productive economically. And so, whether you're going through an African American studies degree, a queer studies degree, a communications degree, whatever it is, for 4 solid years, sometimes more than that, one is bombarded with, the typical leftist college narrative of everybody is a victim. Nobody has any control over the decisions that they make. Facts don't matter. Things like that. What you feel is what matters. And so, when you couple this in men going through these programs with the crippling economic situation that's faced when people graduate into the real world and realize that, holy shit, I can't pay my light bill with a deconstructionist interpretation of the work of Ayn Rand, or I can't pay my car payment with um, a 3-page paper on some aspect of feminism, right? So there's no market value to this. But men in general have gone through 4 years of this brainwashing. So they're being set up for this victim mentality, and they're being set up to view the government as a savior. Not necessarily directly, but through the Marxist and culturally Marxist ideology that permeates the halls of the liberal arts, social sciences, and humanities. It's internalized over a period of time. It was with me. The Army seemed to get that out of me. But, while I was in college, I fell victim to it as well. I am a recovered liberal. I know, right? And so, what I'm getting at here is when you take a generation of men and you tell them that they won't be successful, you appeal to the male drive to succeed, to have a successful life, the trappings of a successful life. When you appeal to that drive for 12 years, men, of course, are going to want to go because we're competitive. We want to kick ass. We want to get that good job. We want to do that. So we believe the narrative. We have to own the responsibility for the decision that we made to do it, but it wasn't without a sadistic underpinning, if you will. So what happens is you have all these men going through 4 years of basically you're an evil, straight, white, cisgendered, classist, speciest piece of shit, and they believe it. And they believe that everybody is a victim, etc., including themselves in some capacity. So when you graduate, go out in the real world and find out you actually have to perform. You have to offer a value, a good. You have to bring value to the marketplace to survive. Imagine that. It's a shocker. And so, and in my opinion, rightfully so. However, well, how does this relate to the government's interest in perpetuating this through basically unchecked and unregulated student loans? Well, a whole generation of men, and I use that term loosely, who have internalized this victimhood narrative, this victimhood mentality, who are crippled economically, are going to be so caught in the midst of struggling to survive that they're not going to pose an active threat to a ruling political class. I mean, it's actually quite brilliant. So, and it's not just men, it's everybody. And any person that is, think Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Any person that is trying to survive, they're not going to have much of a will to pose a threat to politicians in power. And so that's, as I see it, that's what's going on here. And I think this is very intentional. I think this is why you see consistent funding of various, rape crisis centers on campus. I think this is why you see the endless flow of cash into various diversity programs at state universities, because it's all part of perpetuating this victim mentality, this helplessness narrative. And so these tax dollars are being funneled into all these programs basically to promote this perpetual victim mentality and helplessness narrative. And so the purpose of college, as I see it, again, bracketing STEM for now, is to ferment this belief system, this narrative of learned helplessness through the use of academies and academic language and very flawed, methodologically flawed studies. Think gender pay gap, among other things. So this is perpetuated for 4 years. Men graduate, basically, especially straight white men graduate hating themselves because they've been told they're evil for 4 years and brainwashed into that narrative, with that narrative, rather. And so it's a rather brilliant strategy. It really is. So as I see it, that's why college is pushed as hard as it is. And I think it's important for people to be aware of that. I think it's important to be aware of the functional underpinnings of the relationship of big government to academia, to the education industry. They are wonderful bedfellows, and that's, as I see it, that's why. So there's a number of ways to solve this. I'll get into that in some subsequent videos. But how does this relate to MGTOW? How does this relate to men going their own way? Well, first, when individuals cannot pay back these student loans, you're on the hook. I'm on the hook. So that can manifest itself through higher tax rates, through different unique creative taxes, through a number of forced economic measures that you basically have no say over, impacting your standard of living, impacting how you live your life, impacting potentially your job security. If you're not an entrepreneur, if you work for a company or a corporation, evil person that you are, it can have an impact on you in that way. It also impacts you and me as MGTOW individuals. It impacts us because this is a narrative that's only fermented in the university system, colleges and universities. It's just fermented there. And so when you have, a media, you have many aspects of culture that buy into this narrative and that flourish off of it. It doesn't end when you walk across the stage. And in fact, from a lot of the research that we do have, and I'll do some videos on this too, from the research that we do have, the political identification and affiliation you have by the time you graduate college is often the same political ideology, viewpoint that you have for the rest of your life. It's very rare from a developmental standpoint for an individual to change his or her political views after about the age of 25. So, and people in government, people in education, they know this. And that's part of the drive too. So it affects you in that way. It affects you in terms of your personal safety. Think about what's been going on with the Antifa thugs lately. Many of these are disaffected trust fund babies who don't have economic viability or the ability to sustain themselves, who don't have any sense of purpose, any sense of meaning, and many of them, they're very educated. They're a very degreed group of people going around acting violently towards citizens, the media, police officers, law enforcement. That matters. That is a threat to one's personal safety, and the safety of one's family. So, I mean, there are other ways that it impacts MGTOW, but those are three pretty big reasons. So, that, as I see it, that's why this isn't going to change, right? I mean, I love the work that Milo Yiannopoulos does. I love the coverage that Ben Shapiro has done of colleges and universities, but it's not going to change. And as I see it, and I'll expound on this in further videos, but as I see it, the only response is to just not go. Don't go. And basically that going galt in that capacity, if enough people stop going to college, just say, fuck it, not going to take that risk. I'm not going to pay $30,000 a year to have my kid come back at Thanksgiving and tell me what a, Western imperialist I am because I'm carving a Thanksgiving turkey. Until that happens, this madness is going to continue. But I do think it's important to point out that that is, as I see it, that is the relationship between the education system and government. They feed off of each other, and it's a mutually symbiotic relationship. Um, School systems can suck off the teat of tax dollars from big government, and then big government, in turn, their return on investment is a group of, neutered men who are going to be so busy trying to survive, trying to eat, that they're not going to they're not going to pose a threat of armed tyranny to a ruling class, and that's really what's going on, I think. And so, the college system gets its money, it gets its public lauding for molding young minds to think critically about global issues in the world. And the government gets to say, hey, here's a group of people who are much less likely to come at us with guns when we run usurpacious. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. That's just an angle on education, college, and the pussification of men. And so, I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. I will be doing a follow-up video sometime here in the near future. Take it easy.